I am sadly not one of those people who have been vaccinated yet. There are a lot of people who have been across the country. 31 million people have now been fully vaccinated. Nearly 60 million have received at least one dose. The numbers start to get a little bit confusing at this point because we now have the introduction of a one-shot vaccine. That's the Johnson & Johnson. The Pfizer and the Moderna, of course, are two-shot vaccines. You have a decent amount of protection after the first vaccination. Obviously, you got to wait a couple of weeks before this kicks in. That's the same with really any vaccination, I believe. Certainly it is with the flu vaccine. And the CDC has announced as of today that if you are fully vaccinated,
which they categorize as being 2 weeks out from your final shot, if you're getting this 2 weeks out from either the J&J shot or the second dose of the Pfizer and Moderna shot. And
you can now spend time together indoors and unmasked with other people who are fully vaccinated. And this is going to be a weird period of time.
Yeah.
Where over the next couple of months. And frankly, I've been feeling this pressure in my own life because I am, aside from my children and aside from this plastic tarp between us, everyone else I am exposed to, more or less, has received at least one shot of the vaccine because my sister took our parents into Massachusetts. If you're over 75, you can get a vaccine for the person who brings you. My ex ended up getting waiting in line and getting an extra shot at the end of the day. My friend has some immunocompromised issues. And now I'm surrounded by people who are either partially vaccinated or close to being fully vaccinated. And you start to wonder, like, are they taking it seriously? And so it creates a very sort of strange dynamic. Now,
right.
None of those people would get together in a place en masse without me because they
conjugate, right?
Yeah, and conjugate. But it creates an interesting dynamic. We're going to see more of this in the coming months until, and I would say, we are still a month or so out, I think, until we get to that point where there's enough. There's been enough production of vaccinations where people who really want to get one will be able to get one, at least their first shot. And so this dynamic is going to continue. This is what the CDC has announced. And part of the problem, of course, is that there's going to be a percentage. We're going to hit a point, maybe in early summer, maybe late spring, maybe midsummer, where the people who are not vaccinated are the people who don't want to get vaccinated because, of course, there is a anti-vax movement in this country. And there's also sort of one that has been empowered by Donald Trump and the Republicans, despite the fact that Donald Trump, of course, got a vaccination as soon as he left the
Well, that's why he didn't want to publicize it, was apparently to continue to appeal to the anti-vax community. So there is this weird cultural shift there where it's often associated with, say, Orange County, California moms, right, who are anti-vax. But I think it's shifted more towards cultural conservatism in the center of the country. And now seemingly conservatives are seeing this as a constituency in their party.
Yes, and to be fair, the anti-vax movement crosses, I think, ideological grounds, but certainly there is now sort of more of an ideological there's more of an ideological bent to this. And I remember that Meghan McCain clip where she said, in Israel, they're saying, get a shot, give a shot, get a shot. And or get a shot and go take a shot. Yeah, exactly.
To a bar,
exactly.
Which, people were skeptical if that's even true.
I don't know if that's true, but it's not hard to imagine we're going to see more of that here once we get to the supply levels where everybody who wants one has gotten one.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to publicize that. In fact, you don't want to, because you want to encourage people to still practice best practices until we can get enough people vaccinated that we're able to snuff out the the coronavirus, because otherwise it runs around and it starts to mutate, and that creates problems. Now, that, of course, everything we've just talked about is really just, there's, a little bit of reading and a little bit of assessment, and you can come to these conclusions, and it's the responsible thing to do. Let's tune in on what Fox is doing, desperate for some type of narrative. When you've run out of Dr. Seuss, when you have run out of Mr. Potato Head, what are you going to put on air? Well, you go and you take former COVID deniers who are now COVID vaccine deniers.
They've evolved.
And I have to ask you, this is an amazing story, and it honestly baffles me. CDC issues new guidance today for people who've been fully vaccinated against coronavirus. This seems like very weird guidance. What do you make of it?
Well, it is weird. Here's the problem, okay? It's increasingly clear that the vaccines aren't quite as effective as that 95% headline figure was given. So the honest thing to do would be to say, look, the vaccines aren't 95% effective. They're not going to be the miracle that ends this tomorrow or in a week or a month. We're still going to have to live with this on some level. But, once you're vaccinated, things do look better for you. You can drop a lot of the nonsense that, we've been telling you need to do for the last year. And you can go out and you can hang out with people. But I think the CDC is very afraid that there will be cases of people getting vaccinated and sick or dying, as has happened in Israel. We know that's happened in Israel.
Yes.
And so I think that they're trying to cover their rear ends here with guidance that's totally unrealistic, essentially.
Yes. Well, lying begets lying. I mean, they should just be honest, and we would trust them if they were. Alex Berenstein, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you.
Could you understand what he was saying?
No. Lying begets lying.
No, that part I understood.
Yeah.
But what did Berenson actually say here?
He's claiming that people are dying and getting sick due to the COVID vaccine in Israel. That is his assertion.
Was he saying that they were dying because of the COVID vaccine, or was he saying there were people dying despite having being vaccinated?
Right, yeah.
It's increasingly clear that the vaccines aren't quite as effective as that 95% headline number. CDC is very afraid that there will be cases of people getting vaccinated and sick or dying, as has happened in Israel. Again, I don't know if it's as clear, but I think I side with not what I just thought he said, but what you thought.
Well, all right. Well, if it's 95% effective, that means it's 5% not effective.
Yeah.
That means that...
Well, he's saying it's not quite as effective as that 95% headline number.
Okay, it's 93% effective, I mean, the average flu vaccine is effective somewhere between 50 and 70%. Because they're guessing as to what the virus is going to be, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the bottom line is there is not going to be, it's unlikely in this country, there may be some countries, it's unlikely we're going to get to a point where we're going to have no coronavirus. What is more likely is that we're going to get to a point where the number of deaths on a daily basis is less or equivalent to what the number of deaths of the flu are on a daily basis. And the number of deaths of the flu on a daily basis in this country is somewhere between 80 and I think 90 a day.
Citing health ministry data in Israel, Israel says that the vaccine prevents 98.9% of COVID-19 deaths.
But there's still 1.1% left.
Not quite as effective as 95% if you're looking at the inverse, or if you're looking at it upside down, maybe?
I mean, this is just sort of stunning. They brought this guy on there who was more or less a COVID denier months ago, and now has become a sort of a COVID vaccine denier in the sense that it's really not that effective, just so that Tucker Carlson could at the end say they're all liars. I mean,
so
this is the project.
Waters. That's what he does every time. Tucker Carlson just throws unsubstantiated allegations out there in order to create vague skepticism about people in power, but Democrats in power specifically. He'll talk about elites, but that's usually just a dog whistle for powerful Jewish people or just people in government, right? That are on the Democratic side. And if this had been the Trump vaccine, if Trump had marketed it in that way, in the same way he chose to market those stimulus checks, I don't know that we would be seeing this. But this is clearly a constituency of vaccine deniers, of science deniers. Goes hand in hand with what we saw with climate change, that the right is looking to cultivate. And so Tucker Carlson is trying to get ahead of that very, very
he's trying to position
entrepreneurial.
himself.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess once you have spent the past year essentially enabling people to be cavalier about something that ended up killing over 500 and nearly 50,000 Americans and will end up probably killing close to 600,000 Americans.
Check out this tweet from October. I don't normally tweet my Fox News appearances, but this one is vital. This is the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation has been wrong over and over. Why would anyone credit or repeat its projection of 500,000 U.S. COVID deaths by spring? That was in October.
I'd like to retweet that at some point.
And so there it is. I mean, so you have a guy bringing on a guy who has basically been paid over the course of the past year to lie to people and encourage them in some respects to not take this seriously enough that inevitably led to their deaths. Having a guy on who does the exact same thing, I don't know if he gets paid, but it seems to be at least a hobby, going out and a guy who is completely wrong, off by, I mean, a measure of probably hundreds of thousands, right? I mean, we hit 500,000 before we were out of February. And both of them sitting there basically saying at the end, summing it up, mudding the waters about the efficacy of the vaccine and ending it with, well, they're just liars. They're all liars and nobody can trust them.
It reminds me of those evangelical preachers who predict that the end times are going to happen in 2012 and that the book says it, and then they still come on the next day and will act as if nothing happened, basically. Oh, we misread it. How do you have the gall to continue to show your face in public when you're that wrong, that consistently, and wrong in order to grift, in order to...
But it's worse than
steal from
that
people?
because people have died. People, tens of hundreds of thousands of people have died because they listened to these people essentially downplay the risk that were associated with this. Never mind the people who have contracted this disease and will feel the implications for months, if not years, for the rest of their life. Never mind the families who have lost people. That, I mean, at the very least, you predict the world's going to end tomorrow. More or less, it's just sort of like, egg on my face, I'm embarrassed, as opposed to creating this type of death and destruction. But I guess if they're getting paid well, and it allows, it allows Tucker Carlson to enjoy his lifestyle, then maybe it's worth it. We got to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment. We've got a lot more to talk about.